Good afternoon, evil, and I will tell you one story of a good viewing. The forest stood silent under a blood-red sky, its twisting trees clawing at the air like grasping fingers. No path led to the temple, only rumors whispered among lost travelers spoke of crumbling stones half swallowed by ivy. They said that once you heard the bells of the temple's ancient shrine, you would never find your way back. I first heard the bells in a dream. They were soft at first, like distant laughter, then quickened to a frantic clang that pulled me from sleep. When I woke, I found pale petals drifting across my chest, ghostly blossoms that stank of decay. Driven by dread curiosity, I left my cabin and followed that sound across the moor. By moonlit lantern light, the forest grew denser. My footsteps sank into moss, and every twig snapped like a gunshot echoing through the pines. At some point, the dirt underfoot turned to slick black mud, and my lantern flickered as if frightened. Then the bells tolling again, each reverberation twisting my thoughts. I could almost recall my own name, but it slipped away like water through fingers. The temple's entrance opened wide between two gargoyle statues, their stone eyes gleaming with malevolent hunger. Creeping vines formed patterns of skulls across the lintel, and as I stepped forward, a gust of wind slammed the doors shut behind me, plunging me into darkness. The bells stopped. In the silence, my heart pounded so loudly that I thought every creature in the woods could hear it. A single torch sputtered to life on the far wall, illuminating a vast hall. Endless columns carved with writhing faces seemed to moan as I passed, their mouths frozen in silent screams. The air was thick, tasting of old ashes and something fouler like memories decaying. I pressed a hand to my temple. The dream bells pulsed at the back of my mind. Who was I, truly? At the center of the hall sat a shallow pool of ink-black water, its surface perfectly still. Above it, an altar held a rusted bronze chalice dripping a viscous liquid that hissed as it fell. Beneath the chalice, a mirror of polished obsidian reflected my face, or what remained of it. My eyes stared back with vague recognition, but the reflection trembled, fractured as if seen through broken glass. I reached toward the pool and saw ripples spreading across the surface. But the ripples did not distort the water, instead, they dissolved solid things. A feather I'd found on the path, lying on a stone beside the pool, dissolved into ash in midair. A staff I carried, leaning against the altar, crumbled into fragments that fell apart before they hit the floor. A whisper curled around my ears, soft but urgent, "Drink." My throat tightened. The voice was mine, yet it felt alien. It promised release, peace from the pain of forgetting. I took a trembling step forward. Every step stole a memory, my childhood home, the face of my mother, the love I felt just hours ago. By the time I knelt at the pool's edge, I could not recall why I had come. The chalice trembled in my hand, heavy with something cold and ancient. I raised it to my lips. The liquid inside churned like a storm, sending flares of silver lightning across its surface. One sip, the whispers coaxed, "And you belong here now." Below the swirling chaos, I thought I heard a chorus of voices, trapped behind some unseen barrier, crying out for freedom. With a shudder, I swallowed. The world lurched. My bones shivered, and for a moment I was torn between two existences, the me who ventured into these cursed woods and the void that beckoned beyond the chalice's brim. Stars flickered in the darkness overhead, and roots writhed beneath the floor as if the forest itself inhaled me. Then all went still. I opened my eyes. The hall was gone. I stood in a chamber of pure obsidian where countless chalices floated in midair, each containing a flickering memory like a dying flame. I recognized none, yet felt their weight pressing on my soul. The bells tolling again, inside my head now like a funeral knell. A figure emerged from the shadows, a tall silhouette draped in vines, face obscured. "Welcome," it intoned, voice echoing as though hundreds spoke in unison. "You have found the temple. Now you belong to its halls." Before I could speak, my hands reached out to clasp me in welcome. They embraced me gently, yet with a strength that rooted me to the spot. I felt my past unravel as if inside out, every thought unspooling until only the echo of that cursed bell remained. And then I understood, this place did not merely steal memories. It devoured them, fed on the very essence of identity, storing countless fragments in these chalices. The travelers who vanished were not lost, they had become part of the temple's twisted collection. A sudden pulse of light flooded the chamber, and I saw my life laid bare, every joy, every fear, each one flickering and dying. A flood of terror overwhelmed me, I was becoming less, dissolving into this living mausoleum. I fell to my knees, clutching at my head, hunting for the one memory that anchored me. The one I could not afford to lose. My breath came in ragged sobs as the walls seemed to breathe closer. The vines on the figure writhed toward me, tendrils of shadow and leaf reaching for my mind. I fought the urge to drink again, to plunge into oblivion and escape this horror. But the temple had tasted me, it would not let go so easily. Somewhere deep inside, I unearthed a spark, a sliver of defiance. I forced my hand from the chalice and dropped it. The liquid shattered against the dark floor, hissing as if scalded. The chalices wavered and the suspended memories quivered like dying embers. The bells stuttered, losing their rhythm. I staggered backward, driven by a sudden clarity. To escape, I had to remember. But what? My mind was a blank slate, plastered with terror but devoid of anchors. As the figure advanced, the temple itself seemed to rise in opposition, stones shifting, doors banging open, roots ripping free from the floor. A deep rumble shook the chamber. The bells clanged wildly and the water in the distant pool began to boil, sending tendrils of steam through hidden vents. Something ancient and furious had awakened. The vines recoiled. The figure faltered, its voice reduced to a strangled whisper, "You cannot leave." But I heard another sound beneath it. A low, mournful lament, like the collective wail of every soul trapped within these walls. Amid the chaos, I felt the spark ignite into a blaze, a single memory, my name. I whispered it into the roar. The walls trembled. The tendrils of shadow flickered and died. The bells finally shattered, their fragments raining down. A blast of air hurled me backward through a newly opened archway back toward the moonlit hall where I first entered. The torches were guttering, but beyond them, a faint glow marked the temple doors, half buried beneath ivy. I stumbled forward, every step costing me another scrap of recollection, but I dared not pause. Behind me, stones groaned as the temple tried to close itself forever. One last look at the crushing black maw of the arch, and I leapt through. I landed on cold earth, the forest night snapping sharply around me. The bells were gone, but the taste of ash remained at the back of my throat. I clutched my head, hungry for any leftover fragment of who I was. Darkness pressed in at the edges of my vision, but at least my name, my one lifeline, stung on my tongue. Somehow I fled. But every rustle in the trees, every shifting shadow, makes me wonder, did I truly escape, or have I only outrun the temple's long reach? And now, with what remains of me slipping away, I fear that no matter how far I go, no matter how hard I clutch this fading spark, the temple waits, patient, eternal, to steal me whole. A pale dawn seeped through the pines, but I felt none of its grace. My heartbeat was a tremor, a warning I could not heed. I rose from the forest floor, breath ragged and senses dulled by the temple's ravenous hunger. Around me, the woods lay silent and expectant as though the trees themselves awaited my next move. Clutching at the one memory that remained, my name, I forced myself onward, deeper into the brambles. Each step was agony, the wind whispered stolen scraps of thought that fluttered at the edges of my mind like dying moths. But the temple had marked me. I could taste its darkness clinging to my tongue, a poison that eroded willpower with every passing moment. The forest shifted as I pressed onward, pathways twisting in impossible angles. Branches arched overhead like rib bones, scratched by unseen claws. I stumbled upon a clearing where moonlight pooled in pale circles on the ground. At its center lay a child's toy, a wooden horse, paint-chipped yet impossibly unchanged by time. I knelt to pick it up, hope flaring that this talisman might reawaken something vital. But the moment my fingers closed around the horse, the world convulsed, the trees groaned in unearthly pitch, and I was thrown backward, the toy slipping from my grasp and vanishing into a cloud of black mist. A voice, hollow and triumphant, echoed in my skull, "You cannot keep what was never yours to hold." Pain lanced through my temples. Images danced behind my eyelids, a sibling's laughter, a lover's touch, the brand name of my childhood street. They flickered into being only to collapse like charred paper. I screamed, a raw, ragged sound that tore free from my throat only to be swallowed by the forest's oppressive hush. Then, abruptly, the ground beneath me split open in a jagged chasm of obsidian and I was tumbling, eyes wide, into a subterranean labyrinth. I landed on cold stone, breath leaving me in a blast of agony. Before I could gather myself, the walls around me kindled with phosphorescent runes, symbols that pulsed with a sickly green light, spelling out warnings in a language I once knew but could no longer decipher. I rose on shaking legs and crept forward, every step echoing in the underground vault. The air was fetid with the scent of rot and sulfur. Along the corridor, niches held the identical chalices I'd seen in the temple, each filled with the breath of a stolen memory. One chalice bore the pale glow of a child's first birthday, another the warmth of a whispered promise beneath starlight. I recognized none, yet felt their ache, ghostly hands pulling at my core. The runes overhead crackled and the floor rumbled as tendrils of fog curled around my ankles. A low chant began, rising from the depths, voices, many voices, singing a dirge of erasure. Desperate, I pressed my palm to the nearest chalice, expecting the sickly wetness of stolen thought. Instead, my fingers encountered cool glass. The chalice trembled, and from its depths emerged a figure as half-formed as a dream, a woman whose face was masked in shadows, her eyes luminescent with unspent sorrow. She reached for me, lips moving soundlessly. As her hand brushed mine, a flash of clarity pierced the gloom. I saw myself as I was before the temple's grasp, walking a sunlit path with purpose in my step, voice strong and assured. The memory surged through me like lightning, illuminating the cavern in blinding white. The runes shattered and the fog recoiled in hiss. With a guttural roar, I seized the chalice and hurled it against the wall. It exploded in glittering shards, rending the woman's specter into motes of light before they scattered into the darkness. But triumph was fleeting. The labyrinth tilted, axes of stone grinding against each other. A deafening crack split the air as a sliver of the ceiling collapsed, revealing a starless sky overhead. Through the gash, an arm vined with thorns reached down and clutched my ankle. I yanked free with every ounce of strength, tearing at flesh that felt both mine and alien. The scream that rose in my throat was the chorus of every lost soul the temple had devoured. I ripped away and stumbled into the open air, only to find myself back at the temple's facade. The gargoyle sentinels were alive now, stone limbs flexing as if preparing to pursue me. The bells began their maddening toll once more. I fled along the forest's edge, branches tearing at my clothes and skin. Memories fled me in ragged wisps, how to speak, how to breathe, what light was, but one truth remained: I could not stop running. Behind me, the temple's silhouette pulsed as though it breathed, its ivy-thick walls writhing with hungry life. The bell's cadence echoed in my bones, each peal a grasping hand dragging me closer to void. But at the edge of my perception, I caught the flutter of a page, a battered journal caught on a branch. I seized it, fingers trembling as I flipped the pages. Words formed under my gaze: find the Warden. He holds the key. The letters glowed faintly, then burned like embers in my mind, igniting a final spark of resolve. Gathering what remained of my strength, I set my jaw and sprinted toward the ramshackle hut glimpsed between the trees. If the Warden existed, perhaps he could sever the temple's hold. Each footfall cost me a piece of myself, yet I clung to that sliver of hope. The bells raged behind me now, drowning out the forest's natural song. And as the first rays of dawn touched the horizon, I crossed the threshold into the Warden's domain, blind faith guiding me through the haze of my own erasure. The walls inside were lined with relics, broken chalices, shattered mirrors, and jars glowing with memories, fragments of stolen souls. At the center stood a gaunt figure draped in tattered robes, eyes hollow yet fierce. He extended a gnarled hand, palm up, and whispered, "You carry the temple's mark. But you choose to fight." I dropped the journal into his palm. He studied it, lips curling into the hint of a smile. "Then let us reclaim what is ours." As he began his incantation, the air around me thickened, and I felt, against every instinct, the bones of my identity knitting back together. But even as memory and self surged to reclaim their place, I knew the temple waited still, watchful and patient, with hunger unfilled. And as the ritual flame leapt to life, I steeled myself for the final confrontation, one last descent into that living mausoleum to shatter its heart and free every soul it had consumed, or else become its eternal prisoner. Thank you very much, and see you all in the next video.